Hello and welcome to the Walrus Talks at Home RX Belonging, presented by the Belonging Forum. I'm Jennifer Ollett. I am the Executive Director of the Walrus, and I'm also your host and moderator tonight. We are thrilled to be joining you online, live, bringing people together in conversation across the country and beyond. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement, acknowledging the land that I'm on right now in Toronto, Ontario, Toronto. A land acknowledgement helps us recognize history, thinking about how it informs where we are now and what changes can be made going forward in commitment to reconciliation. Our offices at the Walrus and where I am now in Toronto are located within the bounds of Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit. This land is also the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Today, Toronto is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. At the Walrus, we're honored to carry on a tradition of storytelling, to contribute to it, and we welcome you to take a moment to reflect on the land that you're on, wherever you're joining us from today. As part of the ongoing work of reconciliation, and with the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation coming up on Monday, September 30th, if you haven't already or done so recently, we encourage you to read the 94 calls to action recommended by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Bit about the Walrus. The Walrus started as an optimistic project over 2 decades ago to foster conversation across Canada. We recognize that these conversations are complex and necessary, so our storytelling takes place in many forms. You can find us online at thewalrus.ca or read us in print on newsstands. This is our latest issue, or by subscription. You can tune into our podcast or be a part of events like this one. And this work is made possible by our donors, our supporters, and our partners. This is the first in a series of events that we will be convening with the Belonging Forum, focusing on the power of belonging to solve many of the major challenges that we face today. So a big thank you to the Belonging Forum, an initiative of the Samuel Center for Social Connectedness, for making this event possible. As well, thank you to the Canadian Institute for Social Prescribing for their partnership. Now, here's an interesting fact. Did you know that according to the U.S. Surgeon General, social isolation and loneliness can be as harmful to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day? 15. But how do you quit that? How do we address this growing issue? Well, that's what tonight's talks are all about. We're going to be exploring the power of connection and belonging and how social prescribing, which will explain how that works, can build bridges across arts and culture, nature, and health systems to foster a more connected community where we can all thrive. Tonight's speakers, and it's a great lineup, are going to dive into the evidence, explaining how it works, sharing how social prescribing is currently being brought into practice in their communities, and they'll also give you insight in the future of this very people-centered approach to improving our health and well-being. Now, with the Walrus Talks at Home, each speaker has 5 minutes for their talk live. This is followed by a moderated Q&A session with our talkers and all of you at home. So feel free to submit a question at any point in the comments section. When you do post your question, let us know where you're tuning in from tonight. We also encourage you to share highlights from this conversation, whether it's a screen grab or a pic on your phone, or even just a quote you hear that you like and want to pass on social media. So you can just tag us at the Walrus when you do that, or use the hashtag Walrus Talks. Tonight, we'll be hearing from live Kim Samuel, the founder of the Belonging Forum, Dr. Kate Mulligan, health geographer and assistant professor at the University of Toronto, and scientific director, Canadian Institute for Social Prescribing, Diana Rose, link worker, Healthy Aging Alberta, Wheatland County and Strathmore Family and Community Support Services, as well as Kahir Lalji, Provincial Director, Government Relations and Community Engagement, United Way, British Columbia. Okay, I'm excited to kick this off. We're going to begin things tonight with Kim Samuel. So welcome, Kim, and over to you.
Hi, I'm Kim Samuel. As the kickoff speaker tonight, I want to offer a bit of a framework for consideration as we hear from our experts. As someone who's studied belonging and social connectedness for decades now, I'm really happy to see that social prescribing is gaining traction, including at the World Health Organization. More and more experts and non-experts alike are talking about the need for innovative, community-based approaches to healthcare, and the timing could not be better. COVID laid bare a hard truth here in Canada and elsewhere. Our healthcare systems really struggle under the heavy lift required during an acute crisis. And as we have more or less come through the other side of the pandemic, another crisis is knocking louder than ever. I'm talking about loneliness and social isolation. Of course, social prescribing can be used to address a number of complex challenges, but loneliness and social isolation is where I see a particularly big value add. As Jennifer pointed out, the U.S. Surgeon General last year declared loneliness and social isolation a public health epidemic, and the stats bear that out. People are lonelier than ever. They feel less connected, and the fix simply can't be more of the same. I believe that the solution for many of the world's challenges, including this crisis, lies in building belonging. So you may ask, what is belonging? Well, it varies depending on the person, but we sure do know it when we experience it and when we don't. To me, belonging is wholeness and the feeling of being at home wherever you are. To you, it may feel like safety, comfort, or respect. But while belonging will look different for everyone, over the years, my team and I have identified 4 elements that, if prioritized across social, political, and economic spheres, can deliver belonging for the greatest number of people. We refer to these dimensions as the 4 Ps. That is, our connection to people, place, power, and purpose. First, people. This refers to cultivating meaningful and reciprocal relationships with those around us. Place is about feeling connection to the natural and built spaces where we live. Power is all about having agency, choice, and voice over the systems that govern us. And purpose means sharing belief and meaning in something bigger than ourselves. When you look at the 4 Ps of belonging, you may be able to see why I'm such a big fan of social prescribing. After all, social prescribing recognizes that health is holistic. It also appreciates that we can't keep overburdening our medical systems. As we look to the next years and decades, the more effective the strategy is to ensure long-term population health and wellness is going to be largely dependent on a focus on prevention and maintenance. If we default less toward writing pharmacy prescriptions whenever possible and more toward engaging with community care hubs, spending time in our natural world, and tapping into existing citizens' support networks, belonging is sure to follow, and our health will be better for it. Annie Lennox once told me, music is diverse and eclectic by its very nature, appealing to many cross-sections of cultures and societies. It affirms our joy, our longing, our sense of self, and belonging. For this very reason, there should be no surprise that the arts, and specifically music, feature prominently in discussions around social prescribing. I'll let our experts expand on best practices, but I do want to offer an example from the UK that has stuck with me over the years. It's called the Thames Opera Company, formerly known as the Thurrock Community Chorus, beginning in 2011 under the wing of the Royal Opera House. The premise of the choir is simple. Anyone can join, no audition required, and no training necessary. Members range in age from 7 or 8 years old to people in their 80s and 90s. Folks with mental health issues or physical or intellectual disabilities are well represented. This has been an upstart group, a real disruptor, founded on the principles of inclusion and reciprocal caregiving, and the locals love it. That's just but one example. I know that we're going to hear from many, many more this evening, so let's get started. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kate Mulligan, and I'm going to tell you a bit of a story of my own experience with social prescribing. Earlier this year, one of my 9-year-old daughters suffered a life-threatening brain infection. She needed emergency surgery twice. In the months of rehabilitation that followed, I experienced firsthand the power of social prescribing, non-clinical supports for health that are related to health-related social needs. I experienced this in her life and in my own life as her caregiver. Artists and pets visited her hospital room. Peers from all walks of life and all kinds of abilities taught her inclusive ways to participate in sports and games. Chefs prepared food she liked and wanted to eat. An accessible school and a garden and a gym and an art studio all were part of the built environment around her. And it all went into her electronic medical record. It was counted as health work. For me, other parents and caregivers formed a protective circle of understanding and support through our shared experiences. Despite how difficult it was and is for Orla and for our family, this experience was transformative. It was a space of belonging. But it shouldn't take a near-death experience or a specialized kids rehab hospital to access the basics of community care. The evidence is clear. Non-clinical supports and services that help us with the social and environmental determinants of health are effective, efficient, engaging, and equitable. Social prescribing means having support to find and access these resources, even when we face material or psychological or medical barriers. It means shifting our collective focus from what's the matter with us, the focus of our current sick care system, to what matters to us, and having someone accompany us and keep us company in our journey to well-being. At the Canadian Institute for Social Prescribing, we've spent the last 2 years weaving together a network of people like you from coast to coast to coast who are interested in making this happen in their communities. We've made space for funders and policymakers and students and researchers and healthcare workers and community leaders and equity experts and people with lived and living experience. On our website at socialprescribing.ca, you can see the evidence we've marshaled around how social prescribing works and for whom and under what circumstances. We've shown, for example, that social prescribing has a social return on investment of $4.43 for every government dollar invested. We've brought the direct voices and goals and aspirations of people experiencing loneliness and social isolation into the research and planning for social prescribing. We've learned about how community and social and health organizations can work together and what their hopes and dreams are for social prescribing in this country. We've built highly detailed evidence maps about what is known and what is yet to be known about the impacts and processes of social prescribing. We've conducted policy research to understand how social prescribing is finding its way to new places, how each initiative works with people to co-produce well-being, and how social prescribing can help us contribute to broader social goals. And we've seen social prescribing grow in every single province across the country. It's not going back in the bottle. So I'm very, very pleased to have all of you with us today to learn more about how social prescribing can build belonging and better health for all. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Diana Rose. I'm a link worker, also known as a community connector from the town of Strathmore in Wheatland County, which covers about 4,500 kilometers just east of Calgary in southern Alberta. I'm really excited to share with you all tonight what social prescribing looks like in action. Our program's called Link Care, and we currently serve clients age 55 plus, but it's my belief that this work is critically important for all ages. So what does it look like on a day-to-day? Well, clients are referred to us by their healthcare provider, and we reach out right away with an introduction to the program and to myself. I have a small conversation about what matters to them and how we might support that. From there, we book an in-person visit, preferably in their home or where they're most comfortable. And during that meeting, we go more in depth, talking about what kinds of needs the clients might be having. And together we discuss resources and strategies and try to create a plan to meet those needs. And then I check in to see how things are going. but what really makes the program special is being able to accompany my clients to their appointments or activities if that is something that will help them. Some of the services that clients might be looking for are connection and social activities or healthcare appointments that may be hard to access, home services that support aging in place, and even basic needs like housing, food security, and financial support. The most important thing that we do, though, is to be present and spend time with people and build trusting relationships and advocate for the resourcefulness that they have within themselves. So one of my heroes, Dr. Chris Peterson, who's one of the founders of positive psychology, summed it up well in his thesis, Other People Matter. Dr. Peterson's and others' research shows that our relationships and our sense of belonging and purpose and meaning to our days are keys to our well-being and our happiness. So I'd love to share, with permission from one of my clients, an example of the power of this in action. This client had suffered a stroke, and while healing, she was housed in a supportive living lodge. She became very lonely as her spouse had passed away, and her family did not visit her. She was approached by a man on Facebook who befriended her and convinced her that he needed financial help. For many months, the relationship deepened until she was not paying her bills, and all of her money was given to this predator. She was evicted and landed in an overnight shelter and on the street during the daytime hours. To make matters worse, it was winter and she slipped on the ice. It's quite a ways to walk from the shelter to any place warm during the day. And she broke her foot. And while this was all going on, also, her mother passed away, who was also in a care home and who had left her as an executor of her will and her estate. So we worked on building a relationship together and created a strategy for legal support, transportation, stopping the flow of money to the predator, reporting to the police. We worked at sorting out her financial situation, paid her debts, applied for housing, both transitional and permanent housing. We collected food from the food bank, collected furniture. She even bought herself a little scooter to get around to errands and joined a knitting group at the library. When a housing option became available in another community, we worked through that transition together and referred her to a sister social prescribing office in that community. And she's currently doing wonderful, but she still needs ongoing relational support so that we don't end up back in that same situation again. And so that link work is critically important. So she's given me permission to share her story to highlight this profound impact that loneliness can have on your life and the power of relationships for healing. This is an extreme example, but we're seeing lives changing every day. We see people finding hope again after feeling lost and alone. Link workers need to be everywhere, but everyone can and should have the mindset of a link worker. And so those three components that are really key are to be present and spend time with people, especially those who are struggling. See the very best in people. Believe in their resourcefulness. They are more resourceful than we ever realize, and never, ever judge them. And my favorite one is words are wands. You have the power to make people see the world and themselves differently. And when people believe in themselves, their well-being changes. It's not the other way around, as we often believe. So just remember that other people matter and you matter to other people. And maybe in the Q&A, I might have a chance to talk about some of the challenges of being a link worker, but for now, I'll leave it at that. And I thank you so much. It's an honor to be on such a panel of amazing people. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kahir Lalji, based out of Burnaby, British Columbia, or the traditional lands of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam peoples. I'll start off with maybe suggesting that the phenomenon of loneliness and social prescribing as a programmatic intervention is not homogeneous. Variables like culture, language, gender identity, poverty, age, all affect the way one may feel or experience loneliness. As a result, support systems need to be meaningful and relevant to the individual receiving support or receiving care. I'm going to hone in on how social prescribing in British Columbia supports older British Columbians. In a recent study done in Vancouver, British Columbia, 1 in 3 older people over the age of 65 did not have someone to talk to in the case of an emergency, let alone go for a walk with or share a meal with. We also recognized that things like language, culture, loss of identity, loss of personhood, all amplified feelings of loneliness, cultural loneliness, linguistical loneliness. And as a result, we've been able to see by talking to many older British Columbians the impact of social prescribing, including my own family. I was raised by my maternal grandmother. And in the South Asian culture, there is a piece of clothing called a sari that traditionally those that identify as female wear. My grandma had 400 saris, so she never wore the same sari twice in a year. As she aged, she had a stroke about 10 years ago. And as a result of that stroke, she had vascular dementia, and her cognitive decline started at that point. Now, she had a great system, a care system in place. She had a geriatrician, a family physician, she had home care, but something was missing. She was struggling on how to remember to put on a sari. She resorted to her mother tongue of Sindhi, which none of us knew. Through this, her sense of belonging, her loss of identity, her self-esteem was fundamentally impacted. It wasn't until we found a group of Sindhi elder ladies in our local community that came once a week to help her wear a sari, engage in a conversation of her traditional language, go for a walk with her, that we saw her quality of life start to shift fundamentally. And it was because of this type of intervention, complementary to the health system, it is because of this intervention that her life completely shifted in terms of enhancing the quality of life of her later years. This example is not unique to myself or to my family. This is the case of many older British Columbians I've had the honor of being able to engage with and talk to. Social prescribing as an intervention is a preventative upstream approach that really puts the person at the center of the conversation. In British Columbia, we've been able to use this framing as health promotion and health prevention, illustrated by case studies of older people, but also leveraging family physicians and the concept of right to care to advance social prescribing as one of the leading programmatic interventions to support older people to age at home, in community, for as long as they wish to do so. As a result of some of this work, we've been able to amplify and scale out social prescribing across the province of British Columbia in partnership with many different stakeholders, because people see the value of being able to engage in meaningful and relevant activities that is meaningful and relevant to that particular individual. Sometimes when we look at intervention, sometimes when we look at programs, we tend to put a homogenizing effect on some of those programs and policies. And I would suggest that our work needs to be centered around the meaningful engagement of the person that's receiving care, regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of culture, regardless of language. With that, I'd like to thank you for listening to my examples and the way that we're supporting older British Columbians through social prescribing.
Thank you so much, Kahir, Lalji. Before that, Jana Ross, Dr. Kate Mulligan, and Kim Samuel. Wow, I have both a lot of ideas and questions, so we are going to get into it. To all of you tuning in tonight, thank you for joining us. We'd love to know where you are across Canada, where you are in the world. So fill out the form that's just popped up. Where are you tuning in from? I want to say hello and welcome to folks in Burlington, Kamloops, St. John's. Hello, Thunder Bay. What's up, Winnipeg? Incredible. Now, a reminder that we're moving into the Q&A portion, and it's not too late to submit a question. Just pop it into the chat. Now I'm going to welcome back all of our talkers for the interactive part of this event. So just turn on your video and we'll get into it. Now, I do have a few questions to kick things off, and then we will get to as many audience questions as possible. Kim, in your research into social connection, as you mentioned in your talk, you've identified 4 P. So connection to people, place, purpose, and power. Can you share some other examples of social prescribing that support these pillars and how they connect to each other?
Okay. Thanks, Jen. I'll give a kind of rapid fire of examples and try to do one for each of the P's, although they're extremely intersectional. And one is, we'll start with people. Community Health and Social Services Network, which is in Canada, and they have a Community Connector program, which facilitates social connections for English speakers in Quebec, pairing people with local volunteers who help navigate social services and participate in community events, foster friendships, and build support networks. Before I go to the other 3, I just want to point out that all my examples are ones that are really reciprocal, even if someone is the designated person who needs support. I think all of this really works when it's relational, when it's 2 people or more that each has something to give and receive from the other, and then we never stay in victimhood, which is an important place. Okay. I want to, what should I highlight? PARX, a prescription for nature. This is led by the BC Parks Foundation and driven by healthcare professionals. Brings together healthcare providers with prescriptions to patients. In reciprocity, they would just be people coming together 2 hours per week in nature for lifelong health benefits. And this is an evidence-based nature prescription program in Canada. Moving along, power, healthy aging, healthy aging Alberta, social prescribing for older adults program. This links patients with non-medical community supports, including meal prep and food security support, case support management, social and recreational programs, and service navigation. And for purpose, I will also stay with older people, seniors, active living centers, and there are over 300 of these centers across Ontario, my home province. They offer a range of programs, educational workshops, and volunteer opportunities to enhance older people's sense of purpose and community engagement. And again, in reciprocity and reciprocal care in all directions.
What I love is your point on how it all connects, but also anyone who's involved in this work is receiving something from it.
Yes.
Excellent. Well,
Jennifer, if it's okay, I'd love to add to that with another P that really reinforces Kim's amazing 4P framework, and that is public healthcare or public systems. That there is a huge benefit to healthcare providers, community organizations, volunteers, and other people who participate. And in fact, we see that the beneficence or that ability to give back or give to others is hugely beneficial for our health and well-being. At the same time, we can reduce the burden on our really strained healthcare systems by making sure that people aren't going to healthcare for some of these things that are maybe better helped in the community. So that other P of public systems demonstrates some of that reciprocity that we have to offer in a time of need for healthcare.
That's great. building off that, Mark in chat asks, for the sake of easy understanding and clarity, what is the most basic definition of social prescribing? And then the second part of the question is, how big is the gap between how it's applied in Canada today and where it could be? So, Kate, do you want to speak to the definition part? And then I'll put it to Kahir and Diana in terms of like where Canada is and where it could be.
Sure. In fact, we had a big research project this year all about coming up with an agreed definition that people all around the world could share. And so really it comes down to there is a person who would benefit from support with some social components of their well-being. There is a prescriber who could be that person themselves. You could refer yourself in, or could be a neighbor or friend or community organization, or it could be a healthcare provider. So there's a person, there's a prescriber, and then there's a program. There's something that you do. You go out and do, and you participate. So you're provided with support to connect to an activity or some more material support. So it could be a gardening club, but it could just as well be food support if you're facing food insecurity, so something more material. So as long as you're following that pathway, and then ideally, we're tracking the benefits so we can really see, how does this affect your health? How does this affect your sense of well-being? And how does it affect your use of health services? So those are the main components. It means a supported referral between healthcare and social care.
Okay, and how are we doing in Canada? Would love to know where the gaps might be. Diana, here.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Diana.
I'm happy to give my little 2 cents in. I think it's a 3-point question, really. It's about awareness of what social prescribing is, getting people to know how loneliness can affect people and isolation and how that affects our health, and how things like social determinants of health can support our wellness and alleviate the burden on our healthcare system. And then it's raising that awareness in our healthcare system in general too. And then also the third part of that would be, I think, in having communities play a bigger role in getting more active, maybe volunteerism. It's good for them in their own connection, and it's good for the people that they're connecting to, as was mentioned earlier. And I think that those 3 things can make a huge impact. As far as where it's going from here in Canada, I hope that we will have link workers everywhere, in schools, in hospitals, in doctors' offices, in lodges, support homes, everywhere. But in the meantime, again, I say that it's a mindset that we can all have when we're connected and learning how important it is to just slow down and maybe step away from the computer and just go spend time with somebody and just really listen with an empathetic ear. And, no judgment, just sit and listen to somebody and see how you can support them.
Again, I can just add a couple some supplementary thoughts to Diana's comments. One is, I might suggest that in a land of over 90,000 community-based nonprofits, this idea of social prescribing has been in practice, although discoordinated, although not named. For a long time, local community-based organizations have opened their doors for people to come in to have a cup of tea, have a hot meal, engage in exercise or dance classes, go on out trips to parks and museums, etc. I think what we've seen over the last few years is as a coordinated naming of this work, advocacy to further the agenda of social prescribing, complementary to the other work being done in the nonprofit sector. But I think it's a growing movement. And I think, we've seen this evolve in many different communities, whether it's their geographical communities, whether they're faith-based communities. It transcends age, it transcends culture. I think it's a growing movement. And I think there are also a number of other countries in the world that offer social prescribing, all with their own flavor, all with their own color. And I think that's the beauty of this work, is that whether you're in Burnaby, British Columbia, or you might be in Hamilton, Ontario, or Fredericton, the way it shows up is really dependent on the community it's serving and the people it's serving. And so I think there's a lot of work that's been done peripherally. I think over the last 4 years, we've seen a lot of advocacy and the scaling of social prescribing. And I think, in partnership and in learning from other countries that are doing this work, we're continuing to evolve and in some cases leading the way. But I think this is all part of an evolving movement, because we all know the health system is in crisis, and we got to do something differently to address some of those challenges.
Tim, you do a lot of travel in your work, and I'm curious, when you bring this up in your talks and your conversations and the work you're doing, how it shifts depending where you are in the world. Do some countries and cultures get it? It's built in more. Are others more advanced in terms of bringing it into those public systems?
Yeah, what I've seen in my wide travels over these last years is a couple of things. One is that with more and more pressure on governments, national health services, and so on to deliver, and not being able to deliver, there's a lot more potential and interest in something called social prescribing, and so named in the UK. It's called, where I spend quite a bit of time, it's called self-care. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight is how much of this is happening that people don't know that they're already doing it. And I think that sometimes those are the best examples, because those are examples where you would find an ingredient that's really important, is that unlike if a doctor gives you a prescription, you have the flu, you have something requiring an antibiotic, and you're asked if you're allergic to any, no, and that's written, and you go to your pharmacy and you get that. With social prescribing, as I understand it, and as I've seen it, this is really a co-creation with the person that is doing the prescribing and the person that is receiving it. They decide together. For example, if someone told me that I had to go and take dance classes, this isn't going to happen. This would be hugely anxiety making for me. I might say I might like to go on a hike instead. And I think it's also important to recognize that there's not really one shape or one face to who can benefit from this. So often it's those designated caregivers themselves, whether paid caregivers or a lot of us that are just trying to do our best for our family. It's really important that we get the social prescribing and the care and that attention too. When just very quickly, my sister Tammy, who passed away many years ago, when she was very, very sick, her best friend, Roz, made this amazing carrot soup, and it had all, no cream, no anything, and it was just perfect. And my sister didn't feel like eating it, and Roz, her friend, said, well, I think you really need this. We got to take care of you too. Appreciated that. It also changed my life. I'm always on the lookout for people that don't obviously need some support that will come through. In my vernacular, the 4 Ps are sometimes the one that need it the most. I see that a lot too.
Thank you so much for sharing that. This is from Chloe, who asks, are there any digital platforms currently providing social prescriptions to Canadians, particularly for millennials and Gen Z, who are seeking more personalized solutions for health and social care services? Kate, I'd be curious, a lot of times people point to screens and digital platforms as being the problem, but it's also where young people are spending, really all of us, most of our time. Be curious on how that connects.
Well, it's certainly something that we need, I think, which is, again, an avenue for self-referral for people who prefer to go that route. There are some technology-enabled solutions for social prescribing, but we face a lot of barriers to interoperability across Canada. So, having one physician's electronic medical record talk to another part of the health system or to a community organization is still a big challenge. We do have partners who are interested in addressing this and wanting to do it. And in fact, I'm just starting on a new project about social prescribing on campus for post-secondary students, starting where I work at the University of Toronto. So that's the kind of thing that we're going to look into, because if people are co-creating it, they're going to tell us how they want to access it and how they want to use it. And that'll help us demonstrate the demand for new ways of doing things.
I will also say I've seen a lot of conversations, maybe not formally labeled, on TikTok about this. So that's another starting point, which is going to the platforms you're on and asking the question. Now, I have two questions, Diana, regarding link workers. So Lorraine's asking, are there link workers in Calgary? And I would extend that really anywhere across the country. And Tracy in Carlton Place asking, how do you become a link worker in a volunteer role? You speak a little bit more to the type of work.
So the Calgary one just changed their name, and I'm so sorry. I don't know it off the top of my head what it is. But if you were to call Kahir in Calgary, or it used to be called the Kirby Center, but if you call Kahir or look them up online, you could probably find social prescribing in Calgary. And as far as volunteering, I think if you go to any local organization that is the navigation of community supports and services, your local FCSS is a good starting point. But even libraries are a great resource to go and check out and see what kind of organizations are happening in your area, and just ask how you can volunteer to get involved in people's lives and be support to them. And as far as becoming a link worker, I don't really know. I guess that would be more a conversation for the Canadian Institute for Social Prescribing across Canada, how to become link worker. I sort of happened upon this role through a different role that I had, and immediately aligned with what it was about and felt just passionate about this. And so I feel really lucky to be on the forefront of this across our country and in our province, and especially in our little community. And so, yeah, I just encourage people to keep looking. I believe with all my heart, if you're looking for a way to contribute, it will find you.
Thank you so much for this. Another question comes from the audience. Ilana asks, something inherently sad about social prescribing is that the natural people you think would be in relationship are not there, friends and family. Does social prescribing try to reestablish the links that have been lost in people's lives? Okay, Kate, I'm seeing you nodding. You want to jump in there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important because, as Kim mentioned earlier, social prescribing is a relationships-based approach to understanding health and well-being. That's what health is. Like, if we're not having interrelationship with our environments and other people, we're not living. Regardless of our level of function, which can vary across our lifetimes and all sorts of things that are going on with us. So yeah, I think it is absolutely very important, and I bet Diana Rose can talk about that. In practice, what that looks like depending on what matters to the person. It might be that they have another priority that's going to, supersede something that the link worker or the doctor or others thinks might be important. And sometimes you just start there. Maybe they need to have good care of their pet before they're willing to leave the house and do something else, right? So it really varies, and that's why what matters to the person is so important. But yes, those relationships matter a lot.
Diana, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, we work really hard. Actually, that's one of the key things that we do. We have like a little questionnaire that we've been building and redesigning and revamping as we progress through, and thinking about questions that we can ask our clients that might get them thinking about the things that matter to them. And one of those pieces is always, what does your social circles look like? What does your family circle look like? And how are they supporting you, or what could benefit you? Quite often, in fact, I have numerous folks who I've onboarded their family member as well, if they were over the age of 55 plus, or reached out to them and asked and just introduced myself to them and shared with them how I was working with their family member. That happens a lot. And oftentimes the conversation is pretty beautiful because we're able to support that family member as well. And a lot of times those breakdowns that happen in relationships is happening because they're suffering too. So it helps everyone.
That's a really good point. Kahir, I'm going to send this one your way. This is from Jim, who notes the aging boomer bubble presents a huge looming crisis as they age out over the next 15 to 20 years. This is a crisis that may make the issues of COVID pale by comparison. As this escalates, how would our support infrastructure manage to scale up quickly enough to keep pace with the issue?
Yeah. So I know it's something that we talk about. We know this, right? We know, for example, in BC, almost 1/4 of the population is 65 and older. This, however, is also an opportunity to leverage the skill sets and to leverage the ability for all people to be engaged and to contribute in their communities. You know, about 65% of our workers in the social prescribing field are over 55 themselves, and it has a mutual beneficial effect in terms of being able to be meaningfully engaged and connected. We also, I think, need to shift the discourse and rhetoric around the crisis of an aging population. I might suggest that things like always acutely investing in crisis rather than preventative upstream programming exacerbates the crisis that we may be anticipating. And so for us to kind of really look at programs like social prescribing, where it's community-based, it's preventative, it helps people avert crisis, could be one of the solutions to help what people might fear is a crisis due to the aging population. So that's maybe one thought I might add to that. I think, you know, we also need to look at other social determinants of health, things like transportation, things like access to food, and how those are symptoms of other barriers people may have to access. And so really looking at things like culturally appropriate food, things like healthy lifestyles as a way to prevent crisis, but as a way to help people age in a more holistically healthy way.
Wow, it's a reminder how big this is, but also how in front of it the work is, right? Like it's here, it's tangible, especially if we see the opportunity, not just the crisis. Nancy from Ottawa has a question, and Kim, this is very much in your language. Does it help to have something like a Ministry of Loneliness, which first began in the UK? What are the benefits of these overarching supports, which will shine a light and be the focus for advocacy? Be curious your thoughts on, like, do we need a ministry or a minister of? And yeah, we have different examples of this, and I know you've written a lot on this.
Yes, thank you. When the Ministry for Loneliness was created in the UK, it sent a really important signal in that country, but also around the world, that loneliness was really important and that it was cutting at people's well-being and quality of life and deserved to be taken very seriously. And the Ministry of Loneliness and the campaign to end loneliness that went along with that, also really important for awareness. Having said that and acknowledged that, I'm not sure that we need a lot, now that that's been done, a lot more organizations or that talk about loneliness or ending loneliness. I'm also on the positive side, so I'd like to talk about something for building something, you know, such as belonging. But I also feel that there's an inherent risk when it comes, say, to program, but also to policy, is that while trying not to create more silos, which can be very lonely and isolating and don't allow intersectional things to happen, we can end up inadvertently creating more silos by singling out one aspect of whether we talk about social determinants or one aspect of somebody's life. And so what I would like to see is many more initiatives that raise up issues at the community level, at the discourse on human rights, and certainly in terms of public policy that look, for example, at social housing and how does that work in terms of equity, and how does it work for people that are new Canadians, for example? How's their sense of belonging? And it may not be loneliness that's identified. It may just be I don't fit in, or I'm having a lot of trouble getting a job or getting around. And so then, just like with social prescribing, a lot of different forces need to come to bear in a really warm, hospitable environment.
Well,
If I could,
it's that wording matters. A ministry of well-being is much more effective, perhaps.
I was going to riff off of what Kim's comment was, because um, the intersectionality of loneliness is profound. And some of the work that we've done with newcomers and refugees, having a trauma-informed approach in the way we're creating person-centered planning and connections is paramount. And while things like the Ministry of Loneliness may amplify or shed spotlight on the idea of loneliness, it is intersectional in the way it manifests itself. So I just wanted to augment Kim's points there.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, we're coming towards the end of our Q&A. I have a question that I'm going to pose to all of you. So if you could answer it briefly, then we can get everyone's response here. This is from Karn, who asks, in the experience of the panelists, what is the biggest obstacle for provincial policy makers to make social prescribing an option in the healthcare system? Alternatively, in the provinces where it's working, what are the most promising practices that allow this to happen? So if each of you can speak to what's the biggest obstacle, but also what's so promising when we're looking across Canada. So Kate, if you could kick us off, that would be great.
Well, I think one of the obstacles Kahir mentioned, which is, a sense of crisis and a sense that it's difficult to invest in something that's all upstream or long-term. So I think it's important for us to really reframe that a little bit and think about social prescribing as something that can help with crisis and help us shift that lens towards something longer term. In terms of promising practices, I will point to my friends Diana Rose and Kahir, who are doing amazing practical work in their provinces. And in British Columbia in particular, that work has expanded from an initial 19 community connector roles or link worker roles to 100 Ministry of Health funded positions. So, and that's, Kahir, you can tell us about how you did that, but from my perspective, it's a lot to do with organizing as a community sector and being ready and demonstrating the value and being there and building a nice long-term relationship with the people who make the decisions. And, that's a sense of belonging too, that we belong at the table to make important decisions about our communities.
Kahir, that was a nice shout out. So over to you.
Yeah, I might say that our biggest obstacle is also our biggest success factor and an opportunity, and that is intersectional collaboration with the health system, with the community sector, with policymakers, with funders, and for all of us to join this journey collectively. This started with 8 community consultations across the province, speaking to older people around what do you need to be healthy? What do you need to be happy? And this idea of social prescribing was really a response to what British Columbians were telling us. And for us to be able to translate that in a way that shows up in policy, that shows up in funding, it took us a couple of years to get there. We had 19 demonstration projects through the pandemic. And we were able to offer a version of social prescribing online that still demonstrated the real evidence and impact of connection, of going for a walk, of having a hot meal, of participating in hobbies that are of interest to that particular individual. And then also using the voices of people that are beneficiaries of the service. When I go and talk to policymakers and funders, I'll bring an older person with me to hear their voices in how this has impacted their lives. And 3 days ago, the British Columbia government published a Age Forward paper in which this concept is particularly identified as part of the strategy to support British Columbia's older adult population.
Great to hear. Diana, and then we'll finish it off with Kim.
So I love what you guys are saying. And I think I'm just going to feed off of that. I think for me, it's about mindset. It's hard to change habits and patterns that we have. And so maybe as a nation, the way that we look at things like crisis, maybe changing that perspective to seeing it as a growing pain, maybe. That's been in my terminology a lot lately. When things get difficult and they feel really overwhelming, it's an opportunity for us to see what kind of strategies and solutions we can find. And I do believe that as the awareness grows in Canada and the work that we're doing, all of the data is being collected, and we are working really hard in our area to collect as much data as we can on the ways that we're impacting lives so that we can report that and continue to find funding and raise awareness to the governments on how this can support health and wellness.
Okay, I'll jump in to round this off. I'm going to do this by tapping my own shoulder. I think that one of the challenges that I see, the barriers, is that this sounds so nice. It's so nice, and it sounds, really easy to do, and all of it. And actually, if you care, caring is, and showing up again and again. But also, there's a lot of research around this. There's a lot of pedagogy around this, and it's not new. It just may be way more important than ever. So I think to go from nice to important, looking at other things related to health in all its forms would be important. And on the other side, in terms of potential, well, this whole hour has been filled with potential, learning so much from the panelists. I would just say from my end, something that I'm seeing a little bit now, still quite new, is social prescribing that's not only for the individual, but also could be taken up by a group of people, such as older people feeling isolated, or asylum seekers not having agency, choice, and voice, and we can go on from there. And it's how to bring this to more than one person at a time, which already makes the world a little less lonely.
Yeah, let's make it a party. I mean that, literally. Well, thank you again to our speakers, Kim Samuel, Dr. Kate Mulligan, Dana Rose, and Kahir Lalji. To our audience, if you enjoyed tonight's virtual event, we have more coming up. On Thursday, October 10th, we'll be hosting Bring Canada's Presents the Walrus Talks at Home, Teens and Screens. As youth mental health problems surge, join us on Zoom for a critical discussion about social media, brain science, and the impacts of screen time. I'm looking forward to that one. Please keep an eye on your inbox. You will receive an email follow-up. Don't miss a future event from the Walrus. Stay in touch with us. Just opt into our free newsletter. There'll be a link to do so in that email. Also, you can check in with our events section of thewalrus.ca. Just go to thewalrus.ca/events. That's where you'll find our schedule. You can register for upcoming events in person or online. We also do record all of our talks, and we'll post a video from this one. And we have an archive and future talks in the Walrus Talks video room on our website. The Walrus is home to Canada's community-supported conversation, and that means our journalism and events are made possible by people like you. As a registered charity with an educational mandate, the Walrus relies on your support to power our work. So if you enjoyed this free event, join our community of support. You can donate to the Walrus at thewalrus.ca/support to ensure that we continue creating stories that matter to you. Thank you again to the Belonging Forum for your generous support, and to the Canadian Institute for Social Prescribing for their partnership. Thank you to our annual sponsors, Air Canada, Bullfrog Power, Inspire, RBC Emerging Artists, and Rogers. Thank you all for tuning in. I encourage you to think more about social prescribing and how we can all be a part of it, whether it's giving or receiving. And the conversation is to be continued. Have a great evening. Thank you for joining us.